Welcome to Mighty Vids 1 True Crime, and today we are going to go into the story of the great train robber Ronnie Biggs and how his life wasn't so glamorous and great on the run from the law for over 36 years. In fact, it was quite the opposite, which was even admitted on several occasions by Biggs. Biggs played his part in the Royal Mail train robbery on his 34th birthday. It was the 8th of August 1963, and Biggs was only a small fish in the robbery. Took along by chance when an old man's house he was working on was a retired train driver, and the old man's job was to drive the train after it had been hijacked by the gang. This retired train driver was never caught, so no one can be certain about his name. The old man couldn't drive the train because it was a newer train than what he drove while he worked for the train service. The original Royal Mail train driver was forced to drive the train after being hit over the head by a metal bar. He was bloody and concussed, but still drove it to the checkpoint. The gang got away with £2.6 million, which in today's money was equal to over £55 million. It was one hell of a plan that if all went well not one person would have been caught. The gang hid out at a farmhouse and was meant to wear gloves while staying there several days, until it was a good time to get away with the money. Many of the gang didn't stick to the gloves as planned and left one massive house of clues. The place was meant to be burned down right after they left, but with the law getting closer, they had to leave sooner, and the guy did not make it to torch the place before the police got there. Biggs' fingerprints was found on a sauce bottle. 3 weeks later he was arrested in South London with 11 other members of the gang. In 1964, 9 of the 15-man gang was sentenced and most received 30-year prison sentences. Biggs served 15 months of his sentence before escaping from HMP Wandsworth, climbing the wall with a rope ladder, and jumping onto a high-raised removal van, which was waiting on the other side, and this is where it all began for Biggs. He fled to Belgium by boat, then sent a letter to his wife Charmaine to join him in Paris, where he had acquired a new identity and was undergoing plastic surgery. While Ronnie Biggs was in prison, Charmaine had started an affair and was pregnant. By the time Ronnie had escaped, she chose to have an illegal abortion in London and set off to join Biggs in France with their 2 sons. It was now 1966, and Ronnie Biggs and his family under new identities took off to Sydney, Australia, where they lived for several months before moving to South Australia. Biggs had spent most of his money by now on plastic surgery, fake identities, legal fees, and people helping him escape from prison and the UK. Then in 1967, not long after his 3rd child was born, he received an anonymous letter from the UK telling him the authorities was onto him in Australia. Several months later they moved to Melbourne, while Biggs lived at a separate location from his wife and 3 children. He took up several jobs there, one being a construction worker for a TV studio. Then there was a newspaper report headlining Biggs was in Melbourne, and the police was closing in on him. It wasn't long till the TV studio he was working for did a news bulletin, and Biggs had to take off fast. He went to stay with friends for 5 months in eastern Melbourne. Ronnie Biggs went alone on a ship to Panama, leaving his family in Australia, and 2 weeks later, he made it to Brazil. How are you liking this video so far? The story only gets better now. For more true crime videos, please like and subscribe to see more. Ronnie Biggs was now in Brazil. 7 years had passed and he was now broke, had fled from place to place, constantly looking over his shoulder, with the law always one step behind him, dragging his wife and kids along in the process. I think life had become tiring now for Ronnie Biggs. Maybe things could look up for him in Brazil. Things were looking up for Biggs with his mission to flee the law. In Brazil at that time there was no extradition laws to the UK. His family remained in Australia, and there was tragic news for the Biggs family. His eldest son Nicholas had died in a car crash in Melbourne. He was aged 10, and Biggs couldn't go back to see his wife Charmaine or his children, or worse of all, he couldn't even attend his son's funeral. It wasn't long before the British police knew where Ronnie Biggs was, but there was no extradition laws to bring him back. Then Biggs met a Brazilian woman, and she got pregnant by Biggs, which meant there was now no chance of Biggs being moved from Brazil as being a parent of a Brazilian child. Ronnie Biggs had made his freedom. He was now protected by Brazilian law. He now had a son Michael, and after Charmaine knew of his girlfriend and child, she filed for divorce in 1974, and it was completed in 1976. Charmaine got to keep Australian citizenship, and sold stories about Biggs to buy her own house there. Meanwhile, Biggs lived a celebrity lifestyle, with people coming to visit the infamous train robber. Football stars of the time came, and even the Sex Pistols, which Biggs starred in one of their videos. Even though Biggs was a Brazilian citizen and done no wrongdoing there, he was still curfewed and not allowed to drink in bars. He mainly entertained guests with his stories and exploits at barbecues at his home. He lived off these people providing for him and buying him essentials all year round. The British police would often come and ask him to come home, and they would offer him a deal. The other train robbers who were sentenced had appealed, and got no more than 15 years in prison, like Buster Edwards, who also went on the run, got 15 years, and was out in 9. Ronnie Biggs knew he didn't have to spend a day in prison, but was this any kind of life? Being broke and living off other people, not being able to see his nearest and dearest. Several of the gang had even been released by now. In 1981, Ronnie Biggs was kidnapped by a group of ex-British soldiers. The men made friends with Biggs and tried to get him to sail to a film location. Biggs became suspicious and knew he would be kidnapped. Biggs was put in a giant hold, all bag, and it a sign displaying inside there was dangerous snakes. Eventually Biggs had to come to terms with the idea, and actually got on with the men drinking on the yacht. Lucky for Biggs, there was a mechanical fault, and the ship broke down just outside of Barbados, and they had to stop there. Just like Brazil, there was no extradition laws with the UK. British police sent fingerprints and all the proof they had that Biggs was a wanted criminal. Meanwhile, the ex-soldiers who had kidnapped Biggs to receive a cash reward was arrested and detained by Barbados police. They was most likely just working with the British government, who had been really angry at Biggs not paying for his crimes and walking free, living it up in Brazil, and mocking the authorities. In 1997, the UK and Brazil came up with an extradition treaty, and the British government requested for Brazil to send Biggs home. Ronnie Biggs had stated he would no longer oppose the decision. However, the Brazil Supreme Court rejected the request, and Biggs was allowed to stay in Brazil untouched for the rest of his life. In 2001, Ronnie Biggs announced to the Sun newspaper that he would be returning to the United Kingdom. He knew he still had 28 years left of his prison sentence and would be arrested on arrival. He arrived by a private jet paid for by the Sun, and his son Michael reportedly got £20,000 for the exclusive rights to the story. Biggs was now in bad health, and it was rumoured and reported that he only came back to Britain for the free healthcare, which his son Michael strongly denied. That wasn't true, and if he needed healthcare, he could gotten it in Brazil with friends and other people who would have paid for the expenses. It was quoted by Biggs that life on the run wasn't what people portrayed it to be. It may have looked like the happy celebrity sun, sea and sand lifestyle, but it was not. The thing he wanted most was just to be free and sit in a London pub and have a pint without looking over his shoulder. In November 2001, Ronnie Biggs petitioned to the governor of HMP Belmarsh for an early release on compassionate grounds based on his very poor health. He had been treated 4 times in hospital in less than 6 months. He requested to be released in the care of his son Michael for the last of his days as his health was rapidly declining. The application was denied. By 2007 he was in really bad health, and he was being fed through a tube, and had difficulty speaking. He was not released from prison, but moved to Norwich Prison on compassionate grounds. In 2009, after a series of strokes, Biggs could not walk or talk. He was bed-bound, but still denied release into hospital or his son's care. He was admitted to the hospital many times. In April 2009, the parole board granted his parole only for the Home Secretary Jack Straw to refuse it. In August 2009, 2 days before his 80th birthday, Ronnie Biggs was released from prison on compassionate grounds. His son Michael quoted that he was happy to see his father a free man. His dad had been on the run ever since he was born, and he never knew any different. He was no longer a prisoner, and a number he was now free. Biggs' health improved not long after he was released from prison, and many people thought his deteriorating health was a scam, but they was assured it was not, and Ronnie Biggs was still in very bad health. He moved from hospital to a nursing home, but had spent a lot of time in hospital over the next 4 years. On the 18th of December 2013, Ronnie Biggs died at the age of 84. His coffin was covered with a Union flag, the flag of Brazil, and a Charlton athletic scarf. A honor guard of British Hells Angels escorted his hearse from the crematorium. He was cremated on the 3rd of January 2014. The reverend who conducted his service drew public criticism for using the Bible verse, "Judge not, that he be not judged." After all what you heard in the video, do you think life on the run was really worth it? He lost the true love of his life, Charmaine, and was not there for her or his family after Nicholas died, not even being able to attend the funeral. He didn't have a good time spending the money he earned, he just used it to evade capture. Scraping to feed his family in Australia, and then not even being able to work in Brazil. Instead getting handouts for pictures and selling t-shirts and telling his stories to tourists. Never being able to step foot on British soil again until it was too late. He would have been out long before he came home to Britain if he was caught or handed himself in.